Training, our outgoing Director of Training, for arranging this and for years of excellent service, Craig Stevenson. I'm going to introduce the very first three speakers to you for the first part of this afternoon, and then I'll be back to introduce our panel to you. But just briefly, we have Ikuko, Margot, and Jack. And the idea here is that we have three extraordinary approaches to thinking about art. Ikuko's approach as an art therapist and the Director of Graduate Art Therapy Training here at NYU is a very interesting challenge back to Jung in terms of the idea about aesthetics. Jung's relationship to aesthetics, at the very least, one could say is complicated. Ikuko opens up the whole prospect of aesthetics as a language and as a tool that is deeply important and very useful. Margot is here to talk to us from the place of making and of being an artist, and to give voice to that. And Jack is here to bring that point of view, which is just legendary in terms of contemplation of image and reflection on what art does to one in the space and in the times in which you spend time with it. So without any further ado, I introduce Ikuko.
Okay, so it's switching the gear, and I'm coming from more like a clinical experience based on my experience as a clinician. So I thank you for Deborah and Patricia for paving my way towards closer to aesthetics aspect of the artwork. So I have worked in a psychiatric hospital for 17 years. It's a long time, but I loved every minute of it when I worked with the patients. And I worked with in admissions unit, and I came across to close to maybe thousands and thousands of patients in my 17 years. So this is the basis of my kind of approach to understanding images, because I literally have seen, I don't know how many, but thousands of images came through my way. So before I get into further, I like to make 2 points of what we do as an art therapist. A couple of the most significant points that which we have to keep in mind. But I like to kind of briefly talk about the concept of self-projection. I mean, I'm sure you all know about this, and it's a very basic, simple concept, but it's really fundamental in practicing art therapy. So basically, the self-projection is, we are all see things as we are, not as they are. So we cannot just help not being subjective in terms of viewing things in our visual world that surrounds us. For example, none of us ever be able to see our own face in flesh. We can see other people's face as they are, but unless you turn around your eyeballs out, we cannot see our face ever. And then also we try to cut off our shadow, we can never cut off. So we are basically trapped. We're just kind of a subjective being, and we just have to accept it. So this is a basic concept that when I work with the patients, when they make art, inevitably they project themselves, not only human figures. Whatever they are drawing, part of who they are is inevitably expressed through their artwork. Naturally, for the people who are more psychotic, who kind of lost, separation between reality and delusion, the level of projection is more prominent. And so I have seen a different level of projection expressed in their artwork. So rather than talking, I just want to kind of show you a couple of examples how that self-projection is sort of being viewed. When I was working with the patients, sometimes they don't know what to draw. So they ask me, Ikuko, can I draw you? So I said, well, I can pose for you, but if you want to draw, that's fine. So I just go, my business, and the people just kind of sketching me. And this happened in different times in my practice by different people. So I'm going to just show you a wide variety of me depicted by different people. And, it's kind of recognizable images to very psychotic me. And, basically the theme is the same. Who I am is who I am. But how they project themselves to portray me is very, very different. Okay, so. All right, so this is normal looking, and nothing psychotic about, but this was a young woman who was maybe mid-20s, and her issue was that really, really pathological symbiotic relationship with her mother. And she never left home, and mother happens to be overwhelmingly controlling. So they have a very antagonistic relationship. But she craved for any kind of nurturance like a little child. So in a hospital, she constantly go to the nursing station asking for cookies and food. So we kind of perceive her to be a very needy, very childlike woman who needs to be protected. So what she did was, actually this portrait is a mixture of myself and herself. It resembles more like herself. But after she finished drawing me, she asked me for yawns. So I gave a couple of different yawns, and she chose the orange. Orange as a color. It's a kind of soft, tempered, nurturing color, and oftentimes the children likes that color. So she chose the color orange yawn and glued the yawn around me and enclosing me. And then on top of it, she writes sunshine. And of course, the sunshine gives a warmth and protect us and all those things. So simple way, what she's drawing is that her needs to be taken care of and protected in a safe place, and warmth shining up above. So this is just a simple, kind of example of, she adds her own personal needs, emotional, psychological needs. Now, this one is drawn by a man. This is my favorite, actually. But, what it is that this image is no arms. There's nothing. So basically, this figure is totally helpless. They cannot do anything. And depending on things for other people to do. So what he was expressing is that being in a psychiatric hospital, he feels totally helpless and not being able to function normally. So there's an element of that sense through my image that he's sort of kind of expressing her, psychological state at that time. So, now it's getting to be a little psychotic. Now this one was a man, maybe mid-40s, and he was kind of delusional when he did it. And naturally, he kind of, adds to the element that which is more of his own delusional thinking and an image of me. And if you look at the face, there was a kind of strange rings underneath of it. It's sort of like a disconnected head. So here and there was an element of fragmentations, and then also kind of random, writing and images mixed together. So it shows that his mental state is not quite intact here. And then also you see the spaceship, the red one up above. And oftentimes, psychiatric patients, they feel like they are almost like an alien. As many years ago, the psychiatrist was called alienist. And so they feel like they don't belong in a real life in many ways. They're like really somewhere else. So that kind of image often also appears. Now, this young man was actually preoccupied with the superhero. So he did nothing but superheroes. So of course I wasn't wearing a costume like that, but he turned me into a superwoman in a way. So then he said, "This is you." But again, he's just projecting his own preoccupation of being a superhero, and he turned me into that, in that same kind of category. Now this one is getting to be a little more scary looking, and he was schizophrenic paranoid, and the facial expression that is expressed in this image is literally how he felt and how he perceived himself and other people as well. So interesting thing is that when person is psychotic, oftentimes the human figure becomes to be very distorted. But external objects such as clothing or the object that he or she is holding, they are able to relate to the object and they are able to depict them accurately. For example, my blouse that which he drew was pretty accurate. But the person who is wearing it, the human person, because it's connected with who he is, therefore it becomes to be somehow distorted based on his psychosis. Now, this person was actually interesting in terms of process. Again, this was me too, and then he asked me, he wants to draw me, so I said, okay. And so he started drawing outline of the face. And after he finished drawing the outline, he covered the chin area of the face with a black chalk, very, very dark chalk. And then it began to look like a little bit like a beard. And he said, well, actually, this is a Jesus Christ. So the image changing into Jesus Christ. And then shortly after, he scraped that black beard area with the edge of the plastic ruler, scraped off the whole black area. And he redrew the outline, and he continued to add the makeup around the eyes, like a bluish color and a black, the rings around, and then also orangish cheek. He added those, and he told me that this is a hard metal rock musician. So again, the identity changes. And then after he finished it, he was working on a hair area, and then at the end, eventually he said, okay, I'm finished. And this is you, this is your portrait. So what happens within a 1 hour period, his sense of identity shifted. He started off with me, but with a psychotic mind, of course, sometimes they begin to kind of lose a sense of self, and it's sort of fluidly transform into different identity. And it's almost like, kind of witnessing what's going on in his mind. And that is the beauty of artwork. It's almost like X-ray vision of what's going on in the mental activities by sitting and observing and staying with the artist who is creating it. So here it is. You can see the wide range of me drawn by different people based on their own issues and psychological issues, and just simply projecting through the image of myself. Okay, so that's about self-projections, and everything about what they do is really inevitably part of who they are is expressed in their artwork. So next point that which I want to talk about is the two parts that which art therapists value very much in a practice. One is the importance of witnessing the creative process. We are very lucky to be able to sit through with the patients when they are making art from the beginning to the end. So we know exactly how the sequence of artwork is developed, and then also their facial expressions and the body languages, what they say, when they stop, where they begin to be more tense. So all those things are observable by sharing and sitting with the artist right next to you. So at the end, when you see the end product, we are not just looking at an object we call the artwork. The artwork at the end becomes to be a living entity. It becomes to be almost like a part of the person, their flesh and blood, because we share the whole process of it. So that is really amazing things. So we are not, necessarily looking at the end product and subjectively interpreting what the image means. Since we have other informations which we kind of gather from the beginning to the end, so the process and a product put together and what the patient said about artwork, all those things help us to reduce our subjective understanding of what the artwork means. Because we don't have any right to say, well, I think this person is schizophrenic based on what I think the image is sort of reflecting. So without those information, as a clinician, we can no way conclude any kind of analytical result about the artwork. So that's one thing. And the other point is that when you look at the artwork, we have to kind of look at the two parts. One is the content. Content is basically a theme, what they're drawing. Is this a scenery, or is this a person? So that's one part. So that part is what we call what is drawn. And the other part is the aesthetic or expressive element, which includes colors, lines, and forms, and compositions. And all those things belong to that group of how that content is drawn. So when you compare the two parts, content and expressive, meaning what is drawn and how it's drawn, you begin to see sometimes incongruency or congruency that patient is sort of expressing. For example, many of the images which you have seen this morning, many of them have that congruency between content and how it's expressed. Because that is more like a sublimated form of art, and an artist is able to really convey authentic emotions and feelings through using aesthetic element matching with the content. But oftentimes the patients, you see a tremendous incongruency, meaning they may be drawing a scenery or seascape, which is supposed to be calming, right? Or something kind of more soothing kind of theme. But color use or line quality is defying the theme itself. So there's a discrepancy between what is drawn and how it's drawn. And one example is that I had a young woman who had a very, very conflictual relationship with her mother. And there was a lot of hostility and anger, but neither one of them ever acknowledged that they hate each other. So the woman came to me and she told me that she wants to draw a portrait of my mother. So I said, that's fine. And I have her choose the material. And so she started drawing the portrait of her mother. So as she drew, she kept saying that I really love my mother and she's the best mother in the whole world. So she's really praising how wonderful her mother is. But on the other hand, I'm observing how she's drawing. She's grabbing, I think she was using a marker, and she was literally grabbing the markers with a tremendous pressure, and to the point that where the paper started ripping. And so, somehow it's incongruent to what she's saying. And the end result of the portrait of the mother ended up rather aggressive, angry facial expression on the portrait. So, which do we tend to believe as an authentic feelings? Is it something about what she's saying, that the wonderful mother, or how she drew it? And naturally, art therapists tend to believe the aesthetic element, in other words, how it's drawn and how the line was used, how the color was used. All those things are far more, to me, it's a genuine expression of the person. So as a therapist, what do we do here? This woman is not acknowledging this rather negative feelings towards the mother, or or not being able to acknowledge it or own it. So, of course, we can confront that to her, in the first, at least our therapists are a little bit kind of bush around, go around the bushes, and we don't just confront often. So we try to use the kind of art media to address to the point. So it may take a few weeks. So what I did was that following session, I brought a few reference postcards of the different artists of the woman's portrait with the different expressions. So that includes like a six or different type of, the portrait of a woman with a sort of different mood and a different expressions. And I showed it to her that, well, since you did the portrait, I brought some references and I brought, some portraits done by artists. So you might be interested in. So we start kind of going one by one with each portrait. The postcard, to just kind of, have a conversation about what do you think this woman may be thinking, or what this woman may be saying. So it's sort of like a kind of playing the game, but kind of encourage her to sort of see through the expression in each postcard and each expressions. And then, we talked about, wow, the human beings, we have such a wide range of emotions. And, we all own it, sometimes maybe positive and sometimes not so wonderful. So, it's gradually, the point of what I was doing is that gradually try to bring her to the point that all the emotions we own, and it's nothing is negative or positive, and it's depending on the situation, we feel different emotions. So gradually helping her to move towards the direction that she's able to own, even she feels really, really angry towards her mother. That's okay. We all have that moments, and to be able to accept that kind of feelings. So anyway, so that is the kind of point that which I'm making with the incongruency between, what is drawn and how it's drawn. And I will show you some of those examples because I think it's most powerful to just show you the example of images rather than talking. Okay, so, right. Okay, so I like to be more like, I want you to be sort of looking at each image that I show you. These are all drawn by actual patients that I worked with when I was in the hospital. So it's actual images. So this was done by, before I go in, what do you see as the most striking element of this image? Huh? Okay, house is not huge space in the middle, right? So, first thing strikes you. Yes, there are many, ground is not solid, but that blank square stares at you. Why this is completely empty. So this woman was maybe early 30s. She was brought into the hospital with the major depression. And she was going through a lot of difficulties and problems with her marriage. And she was really complaining about how miserable her life has been with her husband. And as she drew this, she was telling me that my husband actually paid more attention to the car than me. So she's very clearly complaining that she's the second, not the first one. So when you see this image, there has to be some kind of connection to what she's expressing and what she's going through. But she quickly said to me, well, actually, there's a woman living in this house, and she just finished the laundry. She hung up her white sheet outside of the house. So she's making an excuse of, of course, this suggests that she's aware of the emptiness, right? So she acknowledged that, but she quickly said, oh, this is only a white sheet. It's, drying. So again, as a therapist, what's the next step? So you have to kind of, think quickly. And number one is that she obviously is not ready to accept that empty feeling. Even she knows that's how she's feeling. So rather than directly addressing that kind of empty feelings in her life right now, we have to kind of utilize the aesthetic component or aesthetic means to help her to gradually, kind of face it and then to be able to deal with it in the future. So I asked her, first I acknowledged, okay, that's a white sheet. I just take it as face value. And so I said, well, I know when you go to the store, you get confused because there are all kinds of sheets. There's always white sheets, and then also there will be sheets with a floral pattern, or maybe there are sheets with the stripes. So there are different kinds. So I said, would you like to kind of, change the kind of pattern of the sheets? And at this point, she said no. So that indicates that she's not ready, in a way. In other words, of course, my intention is, sometimes, well, maybe can I help her to uplift her feeling a little bit? But she isn't there. So naturally, I can push her in a way. So, that's the kind of example. And then also when you look at the house, roof part is look very porous. It's like not really fully solid roof. So if the rain pours in adverse weather, this house is not well protected. So that could be yet another way to kind of express that, okay, this household is not really protected, well protected, or, right. And then also the clouds, which is colored in blue, looks rather heavy, and more like, rather than fluffy white clouds, it looks more like oppressive, objects hovering over them, like a floating anxiety or whatever. And then car, that which is right next to the house, is facing towards away from house. So, if you were to sort of equate that car to be maybe representing her husband, because she mentioned about she pays lots of attention to the car, so that could be another, indication. These are all hunches. We do a lot of hunching, with the art therapy, because we cannot conclude until, we really have a convincing kind of understanding of what they are expressed. So, but anyway, so those are the issues. Now, I'm going to skip this. All right, now I'm going to show you 3 images drawn by people who are just about to be discharged from the hospital. Now, oftentimes we think about, discharge, yippee, just go out to the community. That's not like that. Most of the patients who are ready to be facing the discharge, they go through tremendous anxieties. I mean, after all, you understand that, because in a hospital, they are very, very protected in many ways, sheltered. And once you're in a community, they have to be independent, and they have to take their own responsibility. So in many ways, it's a very scary, kind of stressful situation. So oftentimes, these patients go to talk to the social worker or psychologist, and they express that, yes, I'm fully ready. I'm sick and tired of being in a hospital. I just want to get out of here. But the same person come and then draw images, different part of the feelings surface. So this is one example. So he chose a watercolor. It's a seascape. And so he was using the watercolor in a very soothing back and forth motion. And then, as you notice, he started off from your right? Okay. And as he moved towards left of the image, you see the little bit more waves and a kind of, it's not as smooth as this one. So he continued the same way with the sand area and then water area and sky. And as he moved towards the left side, he began to be a little bit shaky. And, but inevitably, what you can see is that he's trying to soothe himself by using watercolor with a very soothing material, and then just go back and forth in a very kind of, self-soothing manner. But then you become to be a little bit anxious towards the other end of it. And then at the end, he drew these little black things in the middle. And he said, it's a tornado coming. So, he didn't say coming. He said, it's a tornado. Far up in the horizon. So I asked him, which direction does the tornado going? And he said, actually, it's coming towards the shore. But the people on the beach was already warned. So everybody left. So nobody's going to get hurt. So what he's saying here is that, I know that there may be danger, but I will be safe. It'll be okay. So he's kind of trying to convince himself that, potential dangers or kind of, difficulties, but I think he's saying, I think I may be able to be safe in this situation. So, so that's one. Okay, this is another young man that was about to discharge from the hospital. So when you look at this image, the theme is a strong weightlifter, right? So naturally, if you look at, I think about the theme, he wants to portray someone who is strong enough to be able to take care of himself in the outside world. But then you begin to look at the aesthetic element, the color or the line quality, and what's going on in this image is that, look at this body. It's not quite together, right? I mean, the arm is sort of separated, fragmented, and pectoral muscle even looks more like a woman's mother's breast. And all in all, in spite of the muscle, the arms look sort of short. So all in all, this body is not quite, in reality, be able to really lift that heavy weight. And then he told me that all the colors up on the top are spotlights. So what does that imply? Meaning, yeah, he's going to be being watched. In other words, he feels like he's on a stage, meaning he has to perform. in a community. When he goes out, somehow he has to do something to just perform. So again, that could be another, meaning. And when you look at the weight itself, he used the edge of the paper. So in some way, he is sort of relying on the support from the edge of the paper. In other words, if he drew the weight away from the edge, it's a freestanding. In other words, this person really has to pull up all the weight, but in some way, it's sort of like a kind of dependency on the edge of the paper so that weight is kind of held. So those are, what we sort of think about the symbolic way of what he feels at this point. It's almost time, right? All right, okay, I just want to show you this. This is not the discharge situation. This is the very first session with an individual session. So I have interning student. She was a middle-aged woman, maybe mid-50s. So she was assigned to work with this young man. So young man happens to be living with his mother. And mother and he are, again, really, really antagonistic relationship. He's in the mid-30s. And so time to time he is brought to the hospital because he physically attacked his mother. Again, one of those fusion with a mother and a symbiotic relationship, there is inevitably resentment and anger in that kind of situation. So he strikes out once in a while, and then he was brought into the hospital. And his mother happens to be mid-50s. So this is the first session that he drew with my interning students, who happens to be a woman of mid-50s. So he drew this image, and physically he doesn't look like this at all. He was well-fit, thin, full hair, and athletic. So he drew this person who is overweight, no hair, and just standing there, right? So there is a message that is coming out of this patient giving this to the interning students. So what kind of message is he telling or sending to the first therapy session to begin with this interning student? Well, first of all, let's look at it. This looks like some kind of game, almost like tennis game. In a way, right? So the figure is on the other side, and there's a net, and the viewer or another person, maybe it's a therapist, will be another side. So it's sort of equating to the kind of tennis match, the therapeutic relationship, the two people back and forth. So there is a sort of metaphor. But then if that's the case, what is his message that he's telling to these interning students? Huh? Stop? Okay.
The net indicates don't cross the line.
And then just look at the net too. It's not a typical net.
No.
Yeah, and Deborah was talking about the color. But usually when you see the diagonal red line on the street, do not enter, or it's sort of prohibiting, right? In a way. So in some way, he's just using the net, but drawing in a way, do not enter. In other words, don't come to my area, in a way. So he's putting a kind of putting a hold, before. So he's saying he's not ready. Yet he's raising a rocket-like shape, right? The orange shape, it looks like a balloon, more like a balloon, but probably it's a rocket. And if you look at his arm, there is hardly any hand, and also the other hand is down. His feet are inward. There is no way that this person is ready to play any kind of game. So there are messages that he's telling to this kind of therapist that, I'm not ready yet, but I may be ready, but I'm not ready. And just don't, get into my domain. Just leave me alone for now. So if you miss that kind of message coming from, through the pictorial message, rather, you miss something in a way. So it's very interesting when the patient draw the first image and give that to the therapist. You'll be surprised. All kinds of messages coming through, and then in order to see it again beyond the content. Aesthetically, how they expressing those things to, just kind of convey more authentic emotions, rather than, conscious level, verbal expressions of things. They are often quite different in a way. So I have a lot more pictures, which is very interesting, but my time is up. So that's the end.